Chapter 21, Party Foul, Part 2. As Rarity tailed after her friends, Note's words were still ringing in my head, and I was beginning to doubt my coming story. Should I go with the fishing tale, like I said? Sure, accidentally snagging a giant purple sea serpent is impressive, by human standards, but I didn't think that the ponies would be entertained with another story of how I bravely ran away from a monster, again. Maybe I could make something up, or use something I said in the movies before, or just tell them a story from my world.
Hey, Hunter?
My train of thought crashed, and I looked behind me to find Rainbow still standing by the snack counter. Oh, you're still here, I worded carefully. It sounded like something was on her mind. I didn't care to pry, but I didn't want this to drag out either. Something you need?
You think we could talk about things sometime?
She asked. My brow furrowed. I didn't like the vagueness of that question. Depends on the things, I said bluntly. You couldn't have brought it up when everyone else was here?
Every pony else already knows about it, she admitted. They keep begging me to tell you too. I don't know. I don't want to do it here because I'm worried you'll make a scene over it.
That grabbed my attention. Is it something I should be making a scene over? I demanded.
What? No! Look,
She threw both of her forelegs up to cover her face and released a frustrated groan into them. Her hooves fell back to the floor, revealing exhausted eyes.
Look, just whenever we get the chance, I need to get this off my chest. And then you can be as mad with me as you want, deal? I just don't want any pony else to try and drag themselves into it. It's just between us.
I didn't appreciate the secrets, but I was also done trying to fish this out. Deal, I sighed. Sometime, somewhere, somehow, maybe. Can't make any promises. She didn't look happy with the answer, but she didn't look like she was going to press either.
All right,
she nodded, turning back to the crowd.
Well, I better make sure the fools aren't drowning in the apple bobbing bucket. Try to enjoy the party, would you? Rarity put a lot of effort into it.
I watched her trail off and disappear into the crowd. Something wasn't sitting right in my head, and I racked it to think of what this mystery topic could have possibly been about. After a few seconds passed, I decided to dismiss it. After all, as I looked back to the table of friends, I realized there were more important things for me to worry about during my own welcome party. Noteworthy saved me a seat next to him, and a weight was lifted off my chest as I sat down with my friends. Suddenly, it felt as though my little run-in with Pinky and Rainbow earlier was already ancient history. Daisy snuck up from behind and playfully bumped into me before taking the chair to my left, and we laughed together as I caught her up on the stories told so far. She teased that I was telling all of my good ones too early, hinting at our conversation from earlier that day, but I assured her that I was saving the best story for last, whenever then might come, and her interest was piqued. Enough to keep her and Noteworthy prying to find out what it was. They almost had me convinced to tell it then. Luckily, a new attraction pulled everyone's attention away from the table. As the music began to die down, all eyes were pulled to the main stage and quickly gravitated to the monster of a cake that towered over everybody's heads. I felt a light jab in my side, and Noteworthy waved for me to follow as he leapt from the table and into the quickly growing crowd around the cake. The towering beast stopped in the middle of the atrium for all to see. I was almost worried it would tip over from the sudden stop. An exhausted Pinkie Pie sat next to it, scanning throughout the crowd. When she locked eyes with me, a bright smile split her face, and she flagged me to come closer. The air was filled with a lively buzz as I waded through the crowd. One thing was the subject of everybody's thoughts, my own included. That was one delicious-looking cake. I stepped into the small ring the ponies had created around the cake and looked at it with new marvel. It was easily taller than me, even without the cart Pinky pushed it in with, and stacked like a pyramid. There might have been enough for the entire party to have seconds, with generous slices.
Whew. All right, every pony, you know how it goes,
Pinky exclaimed over the excited buzz of the crowd.
Guest of honor gets first slice, as big as he wants.
If they weren't before, I could tell all eyes were on me now. I approached the cart and reached for the knife, and as I picked it up, I heard Pinky whisper, "Psst."
Lyra told me your favorite is strawberry, so I made the whole base strawberry just for you.
I paused and chuckled, entertaining the idea of just cutting out the base for myself. I dug the knife into the cake, feeling slightly guilty for tarnishing the perfect layer of icing. As I pulled it out and began to work on the second edge, a chorus of gasps erupted around me. For a moment, I had worried that I had cut a piece too generously by their standards, but when I glanced up, the top of the cake was tilted towards me, and its hole was sliding far too quickly. I barely had enough time to make one shocked step backwards. Oh, son of a... The behemoth collapsed on top of me, and I was poorly prepared to take on the sudden weight and crashed onto the floor with it. The cake had me buried from my knees to well past my head. The only thing heavier than it were the stares I suddenly felt on me. Only one voice dared to timidly break the heavy silence.
Oops.
Her voice was all too familiar. After gathering my senses and dignity from the shock, I slowly sat up. Chunks of cake clung to my clothes while larger pieces sifted away. With my cleaner hand, I wiped away the frosting from around my eyes, and the world gradually blinked into focus. On the other end of the crashed cart stood a heavily blushing Lyra. The partygoers around her had backpedaled away to leave no doubt in my mind.
Sorry, Hunter. I was trying to squeeze through to see you, but... Well, I guess I squeezed through a little too well.
She apologized meekly. She trotted around the cart. She stopped next to me and held out a hoof to hold me up.
Didn't mean to knock it over on you. This one's on me.
Everybody's eyes were boring into me. It felt as though I was right back to square one, with everyone wondering what the beast of the Everfree was about to do next. As I glanced up at Lyra, into her eyes, I could tell that she realized what her little accident had caused. As my gaze fluttered between her eyes and her outstretched hoof, a sudden urge came over me. Perhaps it wouldn't resolve the situation, but, well, it would make me feel a little better. Nah, this isn't on you yet, I said in the most disarming tone I could muster.
Yet?
As my hand clasped around her hoof a little tighter than she expected, her look shifted from confusion to dread.
Wait, no!
It was too late. I dragged her into the remains of the cake with me and smeared a layer of frosting into her mane. Her surprised squeal drowned out the onlooker's surprised gasps. I quickly pushed myself off the ground and left Lyra behind as I took a few teetering steps away. She eventually pulled her head out of the cake and gave me an incredulous glare, but even beneath all the frosting, I could see the corners of her lips pulled up. Now this is on you, I laughed before looking down to see the damage dealt. There was more cake than clothes covering me. My chuckles died down as I tried to wipe some of it off without staining it in. And me? And my clothes? I admitted, resigning to taking at least my jacket off as damage control. A narrow strip of cake still ran down my gray t-shirt, but it was better than what I had to begin with. Good grief. This is gonna take forever to get out. Don't suppose anybody has a spare napkin or 12? Something soft and heavy slammed against the backside of my head and stuck there. I turned around, scoffing and already knowing all too well who it was, and pulled the cake out of my hair. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the cake in my hand before turning to face Lyra, who was standing defiantly where I had left her. A few snickers fluttering among the crowd around me only fueled my response. "All right, heartstrings, I'll play your game," I challenged with a sneer. I wound up and lobbed the cake right back at her. She was quick on the dodge, though, and my projectile found new targets in the crowd behind her. I winced as it struck, and their peers laughed. A unicorn who had taken the most damage stepped forward, horn aglow. 3 hefty chunks of cake rose around Lyra, and the nameless unicorn's eyes stared daggers into me. "Hey, that's cheating," I squeaked. My words fell on deaf ears, though. I barely had time to drop to the ground. One of the projectiles still stuck my shoulder, and the other 2 went soaring back into the crowd, provoking a chorus of objections. The party stood still. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Everyone eyed their neighbors maliciously while flicking their gaze back to the ruined cake. Lyra and I suddenly realized we were caught in the eye of a fast brewing storm.
"All right, every pony, let's all settle down,"
Pinky tried vainly.
"Let's get this mess all cleaned up and I can bake another."
Her attempts to quell the crowd were abruptly cut short as a pie exploded in her face. Near one of the snack tables, Noteworthy shouted at the top of his lungs, "Every pony for themselves!" Chaos erupted within the town hall as a stampede of ponies rushed to whatever pastries they could find. Lyra and I were swallowed whole in the ocean of bodies as many of them rushed to the cake for ammunition. I fought against the current, knowing full well that Ground Zero was about to become a no man's land. If I wanted to survive the night, I needed allies. Pastries were already flying overhead before I made it even halfway to the snack table where I last saw Note. I hoped he was still there somewhere. I lost sight of him among the moving bodies. It felt as though I had a target on my back with the amount of food thrown directly at me. It was hard to tell if this was what the proper Ponyville welcome was after all, or perhaps everyone just wanted to see if they could snag the Beast of the Everfree to brag about it later. I'd never seen them all worked into such a frenzy before. It was kind of terrifying, and yet I couldn't help but share the contagious smile that so brightly showed on everyone's faces. I was actually having fun. By the time I'd reached the table, most of the desserts had disappeared, save for a raspberry pie already missing a slice and a handful of cupcakes. I couldn't find my friend anywhere, but I didn't have time to stand out in the open. Grabbing the pie, I vaulted over the table and hid on the other side to give myself a chance to think. What was I doing? Did I have a plan? A part of me was hoping to have some backup, but it seemed as though I was running solo for the rest of this fiasco. I looked at the pie and tried to think of a good face for a target. Daisy? Well, maybe. Though I couldn't think of anything she'd done to warrant singling her out. What about Zecora? Was she close? I peeked over the table and had just enough time to spot her black and white stripes before having to duck back down from a flying cupcake. She was close, and I could already come up with a few good jokes for it later. I sat there for a few seconds trying to psych myself up, but my concentration broke as Lyra slid beneath the table and stopped next to me.
"Oh, hey!"
Lyra panted, sounding just as surprised as I was.
"I was wondering where you went. How's the cake?"
I snorted. "Oh, it tasted great. Pretty sure I saw a hair in it, though. Don't recommend it."
"You sure it wasn't yours?"
I waved her off with a hand. Details. We laughed for a moment, and she shook her head.
"Real sorry that had to happen. The cake sure looked nice. A lot nicer than I was expecting."
Yeah, well, we humans have a saying about having cakes and eating them. I shrugged. I'll be the weird one if you ask me. Lyra fidgeted.
"So, you're not mad?"
Mad? I chuckled. Why would I be mad? It was an accident, right? She didn't respond, and when I looked at her, her guilty eyes were trying desperately to look anywhere other than me. It was an accident, right? I pressed.
"More or less,"
she said dismissively. When she caught on that I was not satisfied with her answer, she quickly continued.
"I haven't seen you at all since you left. I checked the games and Rainbow said she never saw you there. I was worried you were having a hard time getting every pony to know you better, so I took a page out of an old book and tried to recreate my welcoming party with you. Pinky rushed the cake out during mine, and it spilled right on top of me when she stopped. Every pony laughed, we had a few jokes about it, and it felt like I grew a lot closer because of it. But when I did it to you...
She rubbed her foreleg, embarrassed.
Well, there wasn't a lot of laughter going on. I realized I made a big mistake, so...
She finally gathered the nerves to look me in the eye.
Not mad, right?
Seeing her like that made my heart drop a bit. I playfully slugged her in the shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. Hey, come on. Quit acting like you don't know me. I can take a few cranks gone sour, I reminded her. I'm not mad at you. Her classic smile quickly returned, and she reached out and pulled me into a quick embrace.
Thanks,
she said with a small squeeze. Don't mention it, I chuckled as we pulled away. A pony squealed on the other side of the table, reminding me of where we were. The raspberry pie was still in my hand. Besides, I continued nonchalantly, I'm sure you'll get your just desserts for it sooner or later. Lair was peeking over the table as I spoke, but she blinked and looked back to me.
Wait, what's that supposed to...
Her question was abruptly cut off as I swung the pie into the side of her face. I didn't give myself time to relish the aftermath of my handiwork and quickly vaulted back over the table. It must have taken Lyra a second to come back to her senses, and she soon called after me.
You're dead, Hunter!
A childlike giggle escaped me. I was probably in more trouble than I was willing to admit. I spotted Zecora where I'd last seen her, along with Daisy. They were both hiding behind a couple of chairs, throwing their own stockpile of desserts deeper into the battlefield. If ever there was a chance for allies, they would be my best bet right now. I slid to a halt behind them, plucking up one of their cupcakes for myself. Guys, I need your help.
Hunter!
Zecora jumped.
We've been looking for you. After the cake fell, you disappeared from view. Where have you been?
Daisy chimed in. Look, I can explain everything later, I said quickly, but right now I need more firepower. Lyra's gone crazy, and I'm pretty sure she... Oh!
Gotcha!
The wind was knocked out of my lungs as Lyra tackled me into the ground from the side. I glanced up and struggled to contain my laughter. Half of her face had disappeared behind a layer of raspberry filling and chunks of pie crust. She gave me a malicious smirk and held out a hoof behind her.
Daisy! Pie!
Wait, I wheezed. No, let's talk about this. No sooner than when Daisy put the pie in Lyra's hoof did she swing it into my face. The world suddenly had an eerily strong smell and taste of pumpkins. Her weight rolled off of me, and as I peeled the aluminum pan away from my face, she laughed next to me.
All right, now we can be even,
she smiled. Fine. I chuckled. You got me good. Truce for the night? I asked, holding out a hand. She reached out and shook it, still giggling to herself, and her laughter was contagious. Zecora and Daisy stood over us, giving each other a knowing look and smile. I could only shake my head. Oh, it's been a long night. The food fight eventually died down, with all ammunition and energy fully spent. The party slowly began to draw to a close with it. Some ponies had already begun to leave, admiring their battle scars with their friends as they tiredly shifted out. It seemed as though no one was left unscathed, not even Pinky's stoic overseer. Zecora was the first of our little clique to suggest returning home, and I couldn't blame her. I had spent enough nights in the Everfree to even think about treading its hazardous trails. The thought of getting a good night's rest seemed to resonate in all of us, too, and we decided to accompany her on the way out. Only Fluttershy stayed behind, offering to help her other friends clean up from the mess the town had made in the hall. If I had any energy left, I might have offered to help, too. A clear, starry night welcomed us back into Ponyville, accompanied by a cool breeze. My jacket was draped over my arm like a soiled rag, and after tonight, I feared it would soon become just that. Daisy offered Zecora a room in her house for the night, to which Zecora seemed more than grateful. They were the first to depart from that group, and soon Noteworthy bid us good night as he left for his own home.
I can't wait to get some sleep.
Lyra yawned once we were alone. Yeah, me too. I nodded lazily. I glanced at my jacket and chuckled, holding it out. Think I might need to borrow a pillow, though. Lyra snorted and shook her head.
Just borrow half the bed while you're at it,
She offered.
I don't think either of us could use the hardwood floor after tonight.
I don't think I could argue with that even if I wanted to, I said tiredly. Still, I'd hate to get cake on the sheets.
You think it'd be any cleaner if it was just me?
She challenged. I gave her a look over and realized she was just as bad as I was. Raspberry filling kept her mane matted down in some areas, and though she had brushed away most of the crumbs, her coat was still covered in a patchy layer of frosting. Touche, I chuckled.
Besides, I was already planning on changing those sheets out anyways.
Lyra continued dismissively. We carried on for a moment in silence, and she eventually looked up to me.
So, good party?
I smiled to myself and looked up to the full moon with heavy eyes. Yeah, I whispered tiredly. Best night ever.